Hi there. My name is Dr. Amy. I'm from Whole Food is Medicine, and today I'm going to talk about non-dairy sources of calcium. What are they? Are they as good as dairy sources of calcium? And why do we even care? So first, I want to acknowledge that dairy, milk, yogurt, cheese, those are definitely excellent sources of calcium. However, not everyone can have dairy products for one reason or another. Some just choose not to have dairy. So if this is you, the good news is there are really several excellent sources of calcium that are not from dairy products. But before I share those with you, I do want to first talk about, why do we even care? What's so important about calcium? You probably already know that calcium definitely has a role in your bone health. And in fact, while you were growing up, you were probably always told to make sure you got enough calcium. That was one of the reasons why we were told to drink milk. So yes, calcium is definitely important for bone health, but it's not the only requirement for healthy, strong bones. So even if you get enough calcium, if you're not getting vitamin D, then you will not absorb the calcium. So in addition to getting the mineral calcium, you definitely need to also get a good vitamin D source. I'm not going to talk about how to do that today. I'm really just going to focus on the calcium piece. The other thing to note is that there are other dietary factors that affect our ability to absorb calcium and therefore our bone health. The first is excessive caffeine from coffee or tea or soda. So if you do get a lot of caffeine throughout the day, that could be interfering with the calcium you absorb from foods. Excessive salt intake also affects calcium, not the absorption, but actually it may pull calcium out of the bones. And then finally, there are something called phytides or phytic acid and oxalates or oxalic acid, and these are found in some plant foods. So that's one of the reasons why at Whole Food is Medicine, I always encourage people to have a really good variety of plant foods in their diets daily and throughout the week. Whenever you heavily rely on one source of food for your nutrient intake, sometimes you'll find that there's other problems. You're exposed to perhaps different pesticides. Even if you choose organic, there's some chemicals possibly, and you may be getting too much of something that interferes with absorption of something else. Okay, so those excessive phytic acid or oxalic acid, caffeine, salt, and not enough vitamin D, those are all dietary factors that affect your ability to even absorb the calcium that you use and also affect your bone health. A couple other lifestyle factors: exercise. Weight-bearing exercise in particular promotes bone health. So this could be walking, running, jumping rope. Playing tennis is also considered a weight-bearing activity. And then actually doing strength training, those help with bone health as well. And then on the negative lifestyle factor that affects bone health in a negative way is smoking. So if you do smoke, I know it's really, really hard to quit smoking. Never give up smoking. It may take you 7 or 8 times, 7 or 8 attempts to quit smoking before you finally do. So don't give up. Talk to a health behavior coach like myself about what can be done as far as both medication and behavior change. Medication helps with the addiction, and there's some behavior change strategies to help people quit smoking. Okay, so we talked about why we need calcium. We've acknowledged that calcium isn't the only player in town when it comes to bone health and that there are these other factors. Now let's get back to the original intent of this video, and that is what are non-dairy sources of calcium. So I'm going to first talk about my absolute favorite non-dairy source of calcium. This is kale. And here where I live, it's springtime, and this is in season. And this is kale I just picked up from my local community-supported agriculture group in St. Louis. I belong to Fair Shares. You can look up community-supported agriculture in your area to see what's around you. Also farmers markets. If you have a farmers market nearby, this is the season for kale, is the spring and the fall. So now's the time to get your kale. This is my favorite plant-based source of calcium, a non-dairy source of calcium. One of the reasons I love kale is that you don't really have to do a lot to it. You can eat it raw. You can eat it roasted or braised. It's great in salads raw. If you do some roasting, you're really just kind of tearing it up, drizzling a little bit of olive oil on it, and putting it in the oven and baking it to the consistency that you like. If you like the kale chips and you like them a little crunchy, just kind of keep watching them and turning them over a little with a spatula. But generally speaking, you can get some pretty lovely tasting kale in your oven about 20 minutes, and you don't have to do anything else. Once you put it in the oven, you just kind of wait for it to be done. So that's kind of a nice, no fuss kind of thing to do. So kale, excellent non-dairy source of calcium. But in addition to kale, some non-dairy sources that are equivalent as far as how much calcium is available include Brussels sprouts, bok choy, cauliflower, broccoli, cabbage, turnip greens, and mustard greens. Those are all really good sources, good non-dairy sources of calcium. They're actually absorbed better than the calcium from milk. So when I take my kale, if I were to squeeze out all of the calcium, take out that mineral and just put it in a pile and take some from a glass of milk, what you would find is that there's technically more calcium in a glass of milk, but more of the calcium from kale is absorbed than from milk. So about 50% absorption in those plant-based non-dairy sources that I just mentioned, the kale and Brussels sprouts, cauliflower, turnip greens, cabbage, broccoli, bok choy. About 50% of that calcium is absorbed, whereas a glass of milk is about 30% of the calcium absorbed. So absolute best non-dairy sources are the kales and the other vegetables I just mentioned. Other non-dairy sources that aren't quite as good as kale and are also not absorbed quite as well as milk include sweet potatoes and pinto beans. These are dried pinto beans, but of course you can do canned. And almonds and sesame seeds. So almonds, another great source of calcium, not quite as much though as the kale, and not absorbed as much. About 20% is absorbed. So then that leaves final few non-dairy sources that I don't recommend for the purpose of getting calcium, and that would be Swiss chard, rhubarb, and spinach. They do have calcium and they are very good for a lot of other vitamins and minerals and phytochemicals. However, they have pretty low absorption, and they also have those oxalates that interfere with absorption of calcium. So there you have it. Those are non-dairy sources of calcium to incorporate in your regular eating plan, especially if you cannot have dairy or choose not to have dairy for any reason. So thank you for joining me. Again, my name is Dr. Amy. I am a registered dietitian, nutritionist, and health behavior expert, and I have my own practice and business called Whole Food is Medicine. And I would love if you come to visit me at my website at www.wholefoodismedicine.com. That's all for today.